Is that woman a farm wife working in the fields? Perhaps, right? You cannot tell by looking at someone's expression what their orientation is. They're really separate. You may hear folks talk about gender or sex assigned at birth. The way that it works in Western medicine in the United States, a child is born, a doctor, nurse, or midwife looks at the external characteristics of that baby and makes a decision and an assignment of sex based on what they see externally, right? So we assign based on those external sex characteristics. Someone who's transgender, anyone whose gender identity or intrinsic internal feeling of themselves does not align with the gender they're assigned at birth. So that's an umbrella term because it could be someone who's non-binary. That's someone whose gender identity falls outside of the gender binary. Sometimes I do a little introductory activity where I ask you to tell me how you take your coffee, but you can only answer in two ways. You have to say that you take it plain or with cream and sugar. And I can tell you, I've never gotten through a room where absolutely everyone in the room could answer the question in one of those two answers, right? That is a binary that we constructed. Gender is a binary that Western culture has constructed and said that it's two boxes. So someone who's non-binary falls outside of those boxes. Cisgender, anyone whose gender identity or internal sense of self aligns with the sex or gender they were assigned at birth. Intersex, we saw that in the longer acronym. Someone who is intersex is born with sex characteristics that are outside of the binary. That could be seen either in external sexual characteristics, it could be hormones or chromosomes, and it is actually much more common than people realize. And intersex children are often subjected to corrective surgeries to which they cannot consent. Years ago, it was sometimes done without even parental consent, when doctors would say, oops, gotta make sure this one is one of those box numbers, right? So children would have corrective surgeries very, very early, and parents might not know, or they might be told, oh, there was some small, minor issue, but everything's gonna be fine. Just, this is your baby girl, and go on with life. But that's not how it works. Biology is much more nuanced than that. People who are intersex are born almost as frequently as folks who are born with naturally occurring red hair, which is not, super common, but also not super rare, right? We do have people born that way, and we have folks who are intersex. So when we talk about our labels, we have to realize that everybody has labels, right? Not just members of the LGBTQ plus community. Every person has labels that they identify with. So people who are cisgendered and heterosexual are usually taught that their labels, their identities are normal, right? That they are the norm. And so that automatically means anyone who has an identity different than that must be not normal. But that's not true. Our identities are not controversial. There's no such thing as a norm. There's a bell curve. There's a spectrum of people. And we are all naturally occurring human beings in the diversity of human beings. So we're not controversial, and that's just a really good thing to keep in mind as you're working with people, right? We all bring our own family values, our own religious values, our own biases about LGBTQ people to the work that we do. And if we can really step back and remember, no one is controversial for their identity. For simply existing doesn't make you controversial. So just remembering that can go a long way in some affirming space. When you start talking about labels like gender identity, sexual orientation, we start to have those conversations, you might feel uncomfortable, and that's natural, right? Just lean into that. The more we talk about it, the easier it gets, the less stigmatized that people in our identities are, and the more affirming space that we build also builds more resilience among the LGBTQ+ gay and transgender community. So what is this thing about pronouns? We're sort of hearing about this, and it's kind of politically charged right now. It is seen as trying to be woke, right? Just a part of the English language, y'all, been around for centuries. Pronouns are words that refer to a person, place, or object in place of the actual noun, okay? So we're talking about people. Pronouns are the words that replace your name in a sentence, right? So if you're referring to someone and you don't want to use their name and maybe they're not in the room, or sometimes they are in the room, but it sounds silly to say their name over and over. Timmy went to the store. He went to the store. It was Maria's pen. It was her pen. I worked with Taylor. I worked with them, right? All ways to refer to people without using their names. We're talking about the words that we want people to use instead of our name. So that would be one way to phrase it if you're talking about pronouns with someone. If I refer to you with something other than your name, what would you like me to use, right? So my pronouns, I've actually updated my pronouns and haven't updated my presentation. I have updated my pronouns to she, they. I just feel like that's more expansive of who I am as a person. So Abbi picked up Abby's pen and wrote all by Abby's self. That is a really clunky sentence, right? So we could say she picked up their pen and wrote all by themselves, right? So let's talk a little bit about, some people might say they, he, or she, they, and or even all pronouns. You can use either set of pronouns when referring to them. Some people have a preference of which pronoun you use when they use multiple pronouns, and it's okay to ask. I have a friend who also goes by she, they, and the preference is that when they're not in the room, that they prefer they, them pronouns. So when Kinsey is not in the room, we say they are not in the room, right? That's just their preference. Some people may feel differently about it, and if they use multiple pronouns, it's okay to ask. Do you have a preference? Is there sometimes you would prefer I use they? A note about preferred pronouns, though. Everyone has pronouns. They aren't really preferred. They just are what they are. Okay? That might be hard to wrap your mind around. I'm sorry. I just said sometimes people prefer, then I tell you they're not preferred, but ask questions. Neopronouns have been around for about 20 years or so, but some people are starting to use them more and they're starting to pop up more frequently. So some examples might be ze, them, zir, ear. Neopronouns can be used by anyone, but most often they're used by transgender folks and gender non-conforming folks. What about this singular they? That really throws me off, right? Because they is a group of people, not one person. But guess what? Shakespeare was in love with they as a singular pronoun and used it a lot. We use it all the time today. So what about that person that cut you off in traffic with their big truck? Gosh, how annoying they were. Or how about, oh dear, someone left their phone in the kitchen. I wonder if they know it's here. I wonder if we can get it back to them. Right? You know that's one person and one phone. But we don't know, so we use a they, them pronoun. If someone tells you that they use they, them pronouns, you may use it singularly. It is correct. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary says so. Here's just a little form of different Pronouns and how they're used. This is really grammar school English: possessive, nominative, objective, reflexive, right? They ran, their shoe, I love them, they like themselves. Correctly using someone's pronouns is one of the most basic ways that you can show respect for an individual. Right? It's right there because you're reflecting back to them how they see themselves and what's important, right? You send a message when you don't use the right pronouns that you don't respect that person, and that can make them feel stressed and disrespected and unwelcome. It takes commitment and time to get it right, so let's just start. Etiquette. My friend said they want me to start using new pronouns, but I'm nervous. What if I mess up? Here it is again. Don't let your face plants grow roots. You will make mistakes, right? Practice. Apologize. Do better. Accept that you're going to mess up. Just accept it. You will. You will make mistakes. I make mistakes. It happens. You can practice at home or in your car. One really great trick is to switch to their name all of the time and break your brain from the habit of saying his or he or she or her, right? You're always using their name in the sentence as you practice out loud. Then substitute back in the proper pronoun and start practicing that. You can also have an accountability buddy, somebody that you practice with who can help you and sort of gently call you in when you make a mistake, correct you if you mess up. I want to know what someone's pronouns are, but I don't know how to ask, right? So sometimes it can be really helpful if it's just on a form that someone has to fill out and they have the option for writing in their pronouns. And then you look at that paperwork and you see it, it's right there. That's fabulous. But not all forms are written that way, and very often forms related to the government are not written that way. So we have to get into the habit of asking folks or building space for people to share with us. You can ask people privately. I want to introduce myself. I'm John. I use he, him pronouns. I was wondering what name and pronouns you use. Right? It can be really simple. It could be in a group if you're doing group introductions. For our small group today, I want to introduce ourselves with our name and our pronouns, if you're comfortable, and your favorite ice cream. I'll go first. My name's John. I use he, him pronouns, and I love Rocky Road. You'll notice I threw in share your pronouns if you're comfortable, because no one should be forced to share them. Maybe somebody is still figuring out what their pronouns are and they're not quite ready to share that. They're not sure how comfortable they feel. Maybe somebody just uses the same pronouns they've always used their whole life, but they feel like this activity is silly and my God, why do I have to do this? So don't force them, but build the space that gives people the space to share should they choose to, right? You can always use someone's name. If you don't know a pronoun, just use their name. You can also use the, that, they, them in instances when you don't know, right? If you're talking to someone else and like, I don't know what Aaron's pronouns are. So they were coming in to see me the other day, right? That's just kind of a nice natural way to fall into it. Then once you find out what Aaron's pronouns are, you can use the right ones. So what if you messed up somebody's name and you messed up somebody's pronouns? Again, this is so important. Don't let your face plants grow roots, right? Apologize quickly. Over apologizing makes the person that you are apologizing to suddenly feel like they have to comfort you, and that is not the point of an apology, right? An apology is just to say, I messed up and I'm going to do better. So a really good practice is to just say something like, I don't have this on here, but I'm going to do the example. 3 of us are standing around talking about a project, myself and Sarah and Eric. and Eric uses they, them pronouns, and I'm talking about how to delegate something. And I say to Sarah, Sarah, give that project to Eric. He does really great work with that. I'm sorry, Eric used they, them. Give that project to Eric. They do tremendous work on that, right? So it's just quick, it's easy, it's in the flow of the conversation, and then it just moves on, right? The more I say, oh, Eric, I'm so sorry, that just puts Eric on the spot, right? And we don't want to do that. If other people correct you, apologize, correct yourself, and move on, right? Okay, Sam uses they, them pronouns, remember? Oh, I'm sorry. Sam was talking about their new beagle. I hope they let me meet their dog, right? So it just moves on. What about if there's another colleague misgendering someone that you're working with? What do you do, right? How do you correct that? There's a little bit of pre-work that you can do, right? If you've already built a relationship with someone that you know uses, say, they, them pronouns, or she, her pronouns, but maybe visually doesn't express easily as a she, her, right? And we look and we don't see that, and someone's constantly misgendering that person, right? You can talk to the person that you have the relationship that you're working directly with and ask them, if someone misgenders you, how do you want me to handle that? Can I correct them? Would you rather I let it go? What's most comfortable for you? Because some people don't want you to make a fuss, right? Some people would prefer to just let it go. And some people really expect as an ally that you will step in and step up to say something. If you don't know, I generally err on the side of correcting people, but doing it in a way that sort of calls folks in as opposed to calling folks out, if you know what that difference is, right? So instead of making someone feel really defensive, I try to say, oh, I don't know if you realize, but Jackie uses she, her pronouns. It's okay if you don't ask ahead of time. You can interrupt, encourage, and correct them to move on, right? And this is, I think, an important distinction to say. This is similar to if somebody says something racist, don't you want to interrupt that? It's on the same level, right? You wouldn't let somebody get away with that, or hopefully you won't. Offer to help, be that accountability buddy. Coming out is what we talk about when folks are coming to terms with themselves, with their orientation or identity, which is usually not the mainstream. It means figuring out that you're gay, lesbian, pansexual, transgender, non-binary, and it happens in stages across a period of time. And for people who are members of the LGBT community, it happens over and over and over. Every time they introduce themselves or come into a new situation and they have to figure out how safe it is and whether or not they can share that information. So what happens if someone comes out to you? So give them space to speak. Really listen to someone. Affirm who they are and support them. Ask if they need anything else from you, right? Ask if they're sharing that information with other people. Is this private to me? And it's always a gift. When someone comes out to you, that's a gift. They are sharing themselves, their true, authentic selves with you, right? That is deep personal information that is not a burden. It can feel tricky to navigate systems sometimes, but it is really a gift that someone's shared. So I, usually say something like, thank you for trusting me. I really value our relationship, and I'm glad you felt you could come to me. How can I support you right now? Right? Or how can is this information for other people? You can add that in there too. So be supportive when someone comes out, even if you're shocked, right? You can say, wow, I didn't realize that. Thank you for sharing that with me, right? Right back into that support. Because I don't know about you, but I have no poker face, right? I'm really not good at hiding my feelings. So if something surprises me, I'll fess up to being surprised, but I'm going to be supportive at the same time. Read about LGBTQ topics on your own. Make spaces welcoming, like introductions with your own pronouns to build that space. Have some pride flags or pink triangles, buttons, stickers, ally posters. We talked a little bit yesterday in our session when we had a panel about the importance of visual clues for LGBTQ people, right? If coming out is something you have to do over and over and over again, and you're assessing a situation when you walk into a room, if you're a queer person, you are looking to see whether there's a big cross on the wall that may tell you it's not safe to come out. You may look for an ally poster or sticker or button, something even really small that you can see that tells you, hey, I think this is a safer space. This is more affirming. I can welcome myself here, right? I can share this information. And the reason why I counsel people to avoid religious iconography in their office spaces, the church has been so damaging to so many LGBTQ people, right? That it can automatically set off danger signals, even if that's not true for you, right? And use inclusive language. So don't intentionally misgender someone because you don't like them, right? Bad plan. Don't out someone without their permission. Don't use gendered language when gender neutral language will work. So like rather than ladies and gentlemen, you could say honored guests, you could say conference attendees, you could say learners or readers. That kind of inclusive language also builds affirming spaces. If it can be avoided, try not to divide groups by gender, right? If you want to have a women's group or a women's Bible study, say, that's okay, as long as you make it clear that trans and femme people are welcome in that space. You can still do it that way, but don't necessarily do it just because you're lazy about it. Don't assume gender based on how someone looks or acts, right? This is that difference between expression and identity, and the stereotypes of gender. Stumbling, growing, and learning forward. Accept your mistakes. Make amends. Commit to progress, right? That is what it is about. You can teach an old dog new tricks. It's never too late to learn and grow. It's never too late to expand your practice by becoming more affirming. It requires humility, right? This is the whole thing about checking our egos. You have to be willing to accept your mistakes. You have to leave your ego at the door. You have to be willing to listen to people who have been hurt by systems, right? Who may assume that because you are a part of a system that you are going to hurt them too, right? So you have to be willing to listen. And we have to accept that some people have really been hurt too often to give us grace. And that's when we have to give them grace. Right? We can't hold it against somebody that they've been hurt. We can give ourselves grace and patience, but many people do not have the time to rehabilitate us. We have to be our own rehabilitation centers. This community of, justice professionals is a great place to start. The people who are in this session with you today, other folks in your office that you know, right? Great place to start. We have to be okay with being uncomfortable and the discomfort of growing pains, learning empathy. The best we can do is learn and let our lessons motivate us towards progress. Here are some resources: outnebraska.org, GLSEN, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. Really a great space for teachers or educators, but also just has some really good curriculum or learning materials that you can gather there. PFLAG, a great resource for members of the community, often offers a lot of support for LGBTQ plus folks. Want to learn more about pronouns, mypronouns.org, trans student educational resources, trans ally athlete, or a pamphlet put out by the UNL College, a couple of really great books. This book is Gay by Juno Dawson is nonfiction, and it really just gets into those basic things even more, and the ABCs of LGBT plus. And we have time for questions. We do have about 15 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so I work at Cedars and I'm case manager in the shelter for teenagers. So we have like 12 to 18-year-olds. In one of our programs upstairs, we have a girls' hall with bedrooms and a boys' hall with bedrooms. As an agency, we do allow youth that come in to pick where they're going to be most comfortable. So if we have a kid come in that, you know, feels more comfortable on the girls' side or the boys' side, that's fine, they can choose that. Sometimes we have issues with other kids accepting that or understanding that, and so what is the best way to talk to other kids about that, or is the best way really just to kind of do away with the girls and boys hall and not have it like that?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because some people feel like it's really important to have space that is divided by gender, right? But I think young people today get it more often than they don't, but if they are saying, whoa, 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 I think a good thing to dig into in private with that young person is to talk about what danger they are feeling, what is scaring them about the situation. Is there trauma there that's uncovered? Right? This is a good place to go with that trauma-informed care in regards to really learning about what the distrust of the situation is, and then talking about the fact that folks who are gender expansive or transgender really are much more frequently the victims of violence than they are ever the perpetrators of violence, right? And so helping people understand that can also go a long way to help folks, you know, but it's great that you let young people choose. That can be really important. So, you know, talking about, you know, you had a choice too, and, you know, someone else may make a choice that's different than you, but that doesn't mean they want to harm anybody, you know. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. What other questions? Anything else you want to know? Yeah.
So I have come across a few like situations where parents don't agree, and that's really hard for me. I know it's hard, but hard for me because I want to obviously respect that person, how they're feeling and how they identify, but then I have like a parent over here that's like objecting every time, or you know, so what's the best way to go about that? Because I really want to respect both of them, but I really, really, really want to provide space so they feel safe.
Right. So you have to ask whether or not the parents really need to be in the room. Because sometimes it's okay for that young person to have private space for themselves where you can continually affirm them without their parents continually objecting. I would continue modeling the behavior of using correct name and pronouns. And even if you have to say, you know, this is what Taylor has expressed to me, and this is part of my unconditional regard and respect for Taylor, that I will use Taylor's name and pronouns. You know, I understand this is not how you as a parent are handling the situation, but when we're working together, this is how I'll treat Taylor, you know? And if it's not okay to do that in front of the young person because you don't want to cause a lot of conflict, I would say have that as a private conversation. There's also a project I refer people to a lot called the Family Acceptance Project. It is a project out of San Diego University, or San Francisco University, one of the SANs in California. You can look it up by Family Acceptance Project. They have some really great data-driven information. evidence-based information that they have studied that talks about how far family acceptance will take a young person and how important it can be. So that's a great set of information to share with parents outside. So, you know, just to sort of help them start getting it, you know, and sometimes parents are like, well, what if it's just a phase? I don't want to accept my kids in a phase. I don't want to encourage a phase. So what if it's a phase? Why wouldn't you want to like help your kid safely explore this about themselves so that they feel safe and comfortable and ready to learn and ready to set goals and ready to, you know, so, because kids sometimes do change their pronouns frequently. They sometimes do change their name frequently, right? We should all be allowed to make those, to have those experiences and make those decisions for ourselves. So hopefully that's helpful. Any other questions? Questions for me? Yeah.
I have a question. You had mentioned that kids recognize themselves early on in their lives. So what is your recommendation for like 6, 7, 8-year-olds where maybe their classmates don't quite understand why they're wearing a dress today and they weren't yesterday kind of thing? Just in my experience, you want to like protect them, but you can't protect them from everything. So what is your suggestion on how kids are going to treat other kids?
Yeah, there's some great books out there that you can introduce in a classroom or a childcare setting.
As a parent.
As a parent.
Or a foster parent.
As a parent or a foster parent, really having that conversation to say, you know, some kids might have a hard time that you're wearing a dress, but I want you to know I will always support you. And I want to work with the other adults in your life, like your teacher, your librarian, your principal, to make sure that they always support you too. And if someone's not supporting you, I want to know, right? Because we can't force kids into a box because we feel like we're protecting them. You know, I think it's important to find ways to support that expression when and where we can, right?
Thank you.
And I don't know what community you're in, but Lincoln Public Schools has an LGBTQ liaison that works with families, and the district is very supportive. So I would say, you know, but the liaison is only one person for every single school in the district, which also pulls them in a lot of directions. But I would say that the district probably has some resources also.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? I hear a video next door. Anybody who's a member of the community that wants to say something I didn't say or share something that you think is important? Yeah.
I guess I'm just gonna take the time to like acknowledge like how hard it is for me to be in that space with that child who has that parent who's not accepting. I was that kid, so it's hard. Like it's hard to like not, you know.
It's hard to not be triggered.
Yeah.
It's hard to not be triggered by that, right? There's all of the stuff that the small child of you that was hurt by those things is still there. That's why I talk about therapy for everyone. But yeah, and our instinct is to, you know, really get in there. But that doesn't always help a situation, and we've got to be, you know, we have to find ways to listen to people who don't agree with us and help them to feel heard so that we can help them come to a better place. You know, if we don't listen to somebody and we automatically make them feel defensive, that is nobody's ever been changed by shame, right? I was never changed by shame as a kid, and so it just doesn't happen. So yeah, thank you for acknowledging that for yourself, and it is hard. It's hella hard. Yeah.
I think that's where I struggled the most too. Like, I am learning, no one has ever changed by saying or being defensive or being rude, but like, so I'm a case manager at Cedars, and this was like 2 weeks ago. I was sitting in my office with a kid, and their GAL was there, so like they're literal, like they're supposed to advocate for this kid, and they were using the wrong pronouns. I corrected them. They said, "Oh, I don't do that," and I said, "Okay, I'm not gonna yell at you in front of this kid, so I'm like, we're not doing this." But then I talked to him later, and he was just like, "Well, I am here for the legal side of things, and I have to write their legal name on this paper, and for the court, I have to submit their legal name. So if I get into saying that, I'm gonna confuse myself." And I was just like, I don't have a nice response for this. Like, my immediate response is very snarky, very defensive. But I'm like, that's not gonna help anything. That's just gonna create tension in between this kid and their GAL even more than there already is. So I really just didn't say anything.
I think the response to that is, you know what, the judge said like, yes, we're like, no, you should aim back and forth with this on.
Yeah.
There's no legal requirement in your report,
Right.
but whatever.
And also, you're a grown-up and you should be able to handle multiple data sets at one time. Yeah, there was somebody right here and then we'll come back. Was there someone?
Well,
Yeah.
just kind of taking up, like, I know that so many people are put in that hard position, the legalities of what the parents, how do you navigate when you know you're trying to advocate for a young person, but the parent has the legal right to override what the youth may?
And I think, something I've thought about for those situations is to consider the age of the young person, their level of maturity, what kind of support systems do they have in place, and can they be, what is the legal term for it? Can they be emancipated, right? Sometimes somebody's parents are not good for them. And sometimes that child is better off as an emancipated minor. So, considering those things, especially what kind of supports are in place already, right? Their level of maturity, who they're working with, what programs they're engaged in, yeah, it's a painful place to be, but it's equally as painful to be kicked out of your house because of your identity or orientation, and that is still happening constantly. I get calls all the time.
So to that end, we have several adults that we have had I've been asked to leave my home, and then we have the other side of walking with the young adult through the process of what would emancipation look like. What supports do you need in place? It goes back to Abby saying everybody should be in therapy and normalizing that for them, that it's not anything wrong with them, but you need all of these things if you're gonna walk down that road to emancipation. And you go in front of the judge and you show them, these are all the supports I have available, I put these things in place because this is what I know that I need. So having some trusted adult walk alongside them as they do that is critical.
Yeah, it's much more desirable to be walking through that process and building up your supports than to have the rug snatched out from under you and lose everything at once. Because I have known older folks who have said to me, this has been around, this was happening when I was a teenager, we just called them runaways, right? They were the kids who left home, they were the kids whose parents, sent them to live with their cousins or however it happened, but it was happening then too, and yeah.
I was just gonna comment for when you become a person, you feel really snarky, or it's because they're being
Obtuse.
difficult. Yeah, obtuse. I think one way, just in general, when you're dealing with obtuse people, I have faith in your ability to better support the student, or rather than being you're a grown adult and you can handle this, being I have faith in your abilities. Because then it's just a different way of framing it. That sometimes people are a little bit easier to swallow for them.
That's a good one. That is a good one, yeah. I have faith in your ability to step up and support this young person. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? It's 3:57, you want 3 minutes of your life back? Is this the last session of the day? Thank you so much for coming to the last session of the day and really engaging in this information.